Efficiency. There's just some things you just can't do in a corporate office environment. One of the things I forgot to mention about security is one of the things that typically fails in these audits is the physical security part at a client's office. You know, they don't have a locked cabinet. It's not a locked room. They don't have an audit trail of who went in there and who went out. They don't have any of that stuff. So essentially, and you're all savvy enough, you've seen the internet, right? Yeah. I mean, basically, you can go out right now, download a CD with some free open source software, and if you can walk up to any computer in the world that's PC or Linux with that CD, and you boot from that CD, you will crack that administrative password because it will give you root access to the system. So physical security is paramount. Client fails that piece all the time. But of course, we're business owners, right? We're risk takers. We'll wait until someone tells us we have to do it, and then we'll spend some money on it. That's what government regulation's about. We're certainly not going to go out and do it proactively. Not most of us, anyway. A big driver, of course, is collaboration. With remote workforces, one of you have asked the question about Skype and different types of voice over IP systems, and how's that going to change cloud services. I really just think that's another service that's being delivered through the cloud. I don't necessarily consider it a cloud service in and of itself because before there was even Skype, I mean, Avaya and Nortel were already doing voice over IP. Of course, it didn't work as well over the public internet. You needed, MPLS lines and things like that, which Cisco invented those protocols. Skills, again, you just can't have all the skills you need. And why would you want them? I mean, how many times do you need just the absolute pinnacle of brilliance for that one Exchange server problem or that one Oracle instance issue? You don't need it every single day. There's a place for that. Research, companies with large 9-digit R&D budgets, yeah, that's a great place to be. If that's your aspiration, that's where you really need to end up. But in normal operating enterprise, typically not. Those skill sets you're going to use them sometimes. Gentlemen, please sit down. You're going to use them sometimes, but they're not going to be in need every single day. That's why people who have Cisco certifications, routers are pretty reliable. They don't tend to blow up very much, assuming you have that thing we were talking about before, electricity. You have clean electricity, pretty much your router will last a long time. We had a DNS server, I am not lying, we didn't reboot for 8 years. Not one time, 8 years. Sun Microsystems. Multifaceted. This is really where it starts to meet. When I'm sitting in these board meetings and I have to come up with a justifiable ROI. So I'm sitting with typically one or more shareholders and the person who's in charge of running that organization. Not all of my clients are cell phone businesses. Some of them are owned by other larger organizations. You have this ability to just move the company at any time. I mean, if you don't have to move your infrastructure, you just have to move a heartbeat, a human being from here to here. I mean, you can basically be anywhere. So that's a huge benefit of being in the cloud. Another benefit, of course, is this rapid growth. And of course, everybody talks about growth. Growth. There's plenty of very successful $10 million companies that went out of business when they were $100 million companies. If you haven't read it, I'm sure your professors have talked to you about Collins' Good to Great. You go back and you read Good to Great, and you find out how great some of the companies in Good to Great are, and they're not so great anymore. So things change. It's not all about growth. Sometimes it's better to just be a good $10 or $20 million company instead of trying to continuously grow and try to be a $30 or $40 or $50 million company. Now, we've all just gone through the other side of the cycle, right? We've basically been going through 10-year business cycles since J.P. Morgan bailed out the federal government in 1893 with his own cash. How'd you like to be that rich? That's before the Federal Reserve. And we've been going through these consistent cycles. Yeah, remember Bush 1, 1990, after the Reagan years? Stock market was crazy, it'd never go down. Went down. Bush went out of office. Clinton comes into office. We have 10 great years. Boom. As soon as he leaves, next Bush comes in. Then we have a bad year. Then we have another good decade. Boom. It ends. Here we are, 2010, 2011. So we're coming out of it. The cloud gives you the ability to contract. The problem when you're owning all your own infrastructure versus being in the cloud is you have to go out and you have to do capacity planning. My gosh, I think if we're going to grow and we're going to have 130 people and we're going to have a conference of all of our employees, we're going to have a room this big. Of course, we only have 20 people right now, but we're anticipating a tremendous amount of growth. So therefore, we're going to have to go out and lease more square footage, which we don't really need at all. And then, of course, someday we're going to have to buy these desks and these chairs, and these lights don't get paid for by themselves. And then we're going to have to put all other types of equipment in here to make it actually work. I mean, that's the problem with growth. Growth is great. Everybody's happy. Money's falling from the skies. It's wonderful. But the reality is the music always ends, and there's always somebody who doesn't get to sit in a chair. Unfortunately, some of those people who didn't get to sit in a chair are friends of ours, family members of ours, and they're unemployed. The cloud allows you to contract. You didn't have to go out and say, well, I think, based upon that growth rate on data, we're probably going to need 3 terabytes of storage. Nah, just go out and get what you need right now. The big one is capital expenditures versus operating expenditures. This is huge. The people who hire me predominantly are women. It's amazing in Texas how many women are controllers and CFOs. Both my controller and my CFO are women. One of the problems they have is, well, there's this little thing about capitalization. It requires you actually have cash. And cash is king. Cash is equivalent to having oxygen and being underwater. It's a really good thing to have. You don't need it immediately, but you are absolutely certain you will need it. And it's coming soon. And if you're ever raising money, you'll probably need 4 times more than you originally thought. Why? Because it's going to take you twice as long and you'll have half the resources. So you'll need 4 times more money. You think you need $2 million to start your company? You better raise 12. When I was at MIT doing my entrepreneurial master's program, the woman who founded the little Roomba, little vacuum cleaner and things, stuff like that, she actually lived here in Clear Lake, by the way. She worked for NASA. And, she just wanted to make robots. And then she's just, all right, well, we'll start a robot company. She goes out and starts a robot company. She spends 17 years raising money, not building robots, not being some genius, not getting to do the things that she woke up every day being all totally excited. No, she raised money. And then when she ran out of money, she raised more money. And then she raised more money. And she raised more money. And then they did a project. And they learned a little bit. And they had a couple failures. And they did some other things. And they had some failures. And they learned. And boom, boom. And then all of a sudden, Roomba. Boom. $525 million market capitalization. Now they have so much cash in the bank, it literally pays their entire payroll for the year just on the interest. So, overnight success sensation. Just like we've all heard about, right? 17 years of raising capital. It's a wonderful thing. But you got to have it. Banks are tight right now. You're raising capital, getting money from banks. I mean, the commercials are true. You do have to have excellent credit. You should have excellent credit as an individual. It is essential to being an entrepreneur. Your credit has to be dandy. Trust me, having gone bankrupt, I cannot tell you how important it is to have great credit. That was 1990. It's 2011. Believe me, I'm way beyond it. But it was not a pretty time. It definitely changes your behavior. But when you have capital expenditures, you have to depreciate things. The depreciation laws have changed. We got thrown a bone by Congress when the Republicans took over, broke out that New Deal there. Of course, we didn't have any plan going into the new year on what the tax rates were going to be. December 17th, new tax rates came out. There's this great IRS section called Section 179. What it essentially allows you to do is allows you to buy equipment from VMware and IBM, and allows you as a small business to write off the entire expense this year. You don't have to depreciate it over the life of the asset, which used to be 5 years, but now it's only 3 years. It's interesting. You can buy a 5-year warranty on a server, but the government only thinks it's going to last 3 years. So wonderful thing about Section 179 is, yeah, you can take it, but then the problem is there's a cap. And so when you're a growing company like ours, you hit the cap. So now where are you? You can't offset any income from it, so what do you do instead? Well, they did throw us a bone. We got Section 168, which is bonus depreciation, which used to only be 50% of the asset's value, and it went to 100%. So now actually we have 100% on Section 179, 100% on 168. The problem is you don't have any cash. You're not going to be able to do the capital expenditure anyway. It doesn't make any difference. So you have to go into operating expenses. Just like people in America who are losing their homes today and have the money to go out and they have the income to go get a home, but they don't have the down payment. You know, the old days of lending when you had to have like credit, character, credit score, cash, you know, 43 mortgage bank. I remember I was sitting in the office one day of one of my clients, the only one that's still in business, and he goes, "You're not going to believe this. We have a product right now, we will finance 110% of your property's value for 45 years. I'm like, oh my God, that's terrible. So when you have cash, if you have good cash flow, you can live. You can live a long time. Profit is one thing. Cash flow is something else. You can live a long time on good cash flow and no money, meaning no profit, but you cannot live with no cash flow. I'll give you a perfect example. Who would like to have a $100 million contract right now? Raise your hand. I know I would. Okay, it's with the federal government. My father has been in government contracts administration for Westinghouse, like I said. I think it's like, what now, 37 or so years? I remember him calling me in the late 90s, and he was very excited. My dad's an engineer type, not very excitable person. And we're chatting, and I'm like, wow, Dad, you know, things must be, you know, going pretty good. And he said, yeah, I just closed out a contract that we had with the Department of Energy. Remember back in the day when Westinghouse used to be building nuclear power plants before, you know, we were melting the world with 3 Mile Island? Well, 1974, Westinghouse did a contract for the Department of Energy, and in the late 1990s, they got paid for it. Yeah, that's some money. Cash flow, it's everything. Operational expenditures tied to the cloud. There's a lot of different ways to chop up a cloud. A lot of different ways. You have companies like the traditional cloud providers, Amazon and GoGrid, Rackspace. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, how much bandwidth are you using? How much CPU? How much memory? How much storage? We're actually converting a client right now from an Amazon server. What do they have, Robert? 1 or 2, something? I think, is it 1? 2. Oh, that's right. They got a tricks box up there. 2 people use this. 2 people use this cloud server. 2. They totally could have done it another way. 2 people. It cost them $1,000 a month when they first engaged us. And they engaged us because the brain that they had, the person who built their entire infrastructure, was moving back to his original home state, which was in Texas. So, it's great. Back to that slide with the skills. Your skills just walked out the door. Now where are you? So they call us in, and we go to take it over, and they're paying $1,000 a month. 4 months later, they're paying $2,000 a month. A little shocking to them. So it depends on the metrics on how you're getting measured. Another way to measure it is by licensing. That's going to change in our world too. Microsoft has a product called SPLA licensing, Service Provider Licensing Agreement, where we essentially rent all the licensing from them on a monthly basis, on a per user basis. So instead of having a client access license, we have a subscriber.